Brother.
Well, I am so happy to be with you all, and I'm delighted to be able to share this morning with you. It's hard for me to think of you being that far away, me being able to communicate so well with you. Just seeing your faces and knowing that on the other side, the world, God's will and God's love is being practiced and done gives me so much to be thankful for and to be reminded of. And it just thrills me to death today to be able to spend a little while with you. Appreciate what Brother Paul said. I want to kind of explain that over the years, my father and I have been in funeral service together. I worked with him until I bought the business from him. And then later on, my son came and worked with me, and now he owns it. So I am retired and privileged to do basically what I want to do on my own. So I am very thankful for being able to be with you all today. I am allowed to be in many places doing many things, but nothing I enjoy more than talking about how Jesus loved, and so many different incidences in the life of Christ where he loved. We turn and we think about on the cross and his words, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." What an example of a deep and sincere love that really and truly is. How that forgiveness love is just spread abroad. We found him even as a young lad in the temple teaching those who were older or asking questions, and they were amazed by that. Nonetheless, Christ, even at that age, was teaching those who would listen, more or less in some ways, even though they may not have known it, preparing them for the good news that was to come. And then we see him showing his love in just by the example that he lived, just by the manner in which he gave us moments out of his life that illustrated to us what a servant he was, washing the disciples' feet. What a teacher he was in so many ways on the mountain, where he broke to us all that wonderful, wonderful, wonderful teaching in what we would consider to be the Sermon on the Mount. How he, as a healing physician, showed his love for people with the gift of a return to well-being, a gift of a return to health, a gift of a return to living life as most of us would live it. So every time you and I turn around, we run into Christ loving in some shape, form, or fashion. And what a gift that is to be able to have participated in the love of Christ through the scriptures as he illustrates to us how to love like he does. What I wanted us to think about today would kind of fall on the heels of all of the COVID issues that we've had to deal with. I don't know anybody here at home who has not been affected in one way or another by the devastating effect that COVID has had all over the world. I don't know how you all have had it there, dealt with it there, suffered with it there, but I have just over and over again been with families and with people who've had to deal with that idea of what COVID really and truly could do to them, to their families. I was just recently in Michigan with a fellowship of the church there for a weekend. And while I was there, I found out that church family of some 160 or 70 people, maybe give a little, take a little, one way or the other, the right number, in the last 2 years have suffered the death of 35 of their members, 3 of their elders. And it is a devastating effect when that comes, but it is never more devastating than when it comes to us. At 16, my 13-year-old brother died suddenly and unexpectedly. And then my mom and my dad, and then my other younger brother, and then my aunt and uncle, who were like my mom and dad, and my best friend Bobby Morrison. I'm in the Centerville Church building right now, and Bobby and I grew up here, and we went to Lipscomb and lived in the same room for 3 years until he went to dental school. And how suddenly losing Bobby at 55, when he was 55 and I was 55, was such a shock. When we lose someone we love, it goes to the very core of us. It takes us very deeply into that pain and that sense of hurt that we feel. Kind of shakes our foundations. Well, there's a story in the Bible, and it was so well introduced moments earlier. The story of Mary and Martha and their response to their brother Lazarus's death and how hard that hit them. So what I wanted us to do today, to take a look at how Jesus loved in periods of grief and in periods of loss, because I think that is for us maybe a place that we have been, maybe a place that we have been with others who have suffered with that, and maybe a place that we need to be today is in the lives of those individuals who've suffered that heartache and sorrow that comes with death. Death is not the only thing that causes such grief, but death is one thing that at some point in time, all of us will be touched by and all of us will experience. So what I want us to look at today is how, when that hour comes to friends of ours who have lost someone they love, how is our response with them to be? Let's take a look at John chapter 11, and let's just let Jesus teach us how he loved Mary and Martha and those who were with them through the problem they were experiencing. Now, a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her brother Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. We know that in this situation, Jesus is in the midst of those he loved. We know that in this situation, Jesus is going to have to deal with those that he was close to, but also he was going to have to deal with his own sense of loss and hurt and pain that came along with the death of his friend. In verse 6, it says, so when he had heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, let us go. The very first thing I hope we'll always remember is when someone we love is hurting, that is the time for us to go, to do the best we can, to lay aside what we have at task at that moment and just go to be with them. Through my losses, if I've ever learned anything, just having you there with me helped make all the difference in the world. When my father died, a very dear friend of mine whose mother had died when he was back in high school, I guess, lived 2 hours and 25 or 30 minutes away from me. And when David met me, I was where he worshiped doing a friends and family day, and over lunch we had a conversation, and in that conversation they asked where I was from, and I said, well, I'm from Centerville, Tennessee. And David spoke up and said, you're from Hickman County. I know Hickman County. That's the #1 deer harvest area in Tennessee. I know where you're from. And so we finished the conversation there. And just before I got up and left that lunch engagement we were having, where the conversation had come up about where I was from, I looked at them and I said, any of y'all ever want to come up? Come on up, give me a call. I'll find you a place to fish or to hunt or just to hang your hat for a day or two. After that was over, we went out and we had the afternoon session, and we got ready to leave. And I loaded up in the car, and driving by the building, David ran out and flagged me down, and he said, "Ooh, I'd like to come up." And I said, "Well, give me your number. We'll get it worked out." And that's when David and I began to play, and we've been playing together now for about 30 years or more. David comes up all the time. But when I was standing in line and the other people were coming in, and I looked at the line of people coming in to give me a hug and to encourage me following my father's death, I looked around, and the back of the line, which was way to the back side of our funeral home, David and Linda and their son and daughter very slowly made their way up. Now, they had driven 2.5 hours. David and Linda both worked at Mars Hill Bible School, and it was a sacrifice for them to drive that far and to bring the kids to come see me, because I love them like my own, had grown to do that over the years. And just to see David there meant so much. And he walked up, and Linda gave me a hug, and David shook my hand like a man could only shake a hand. And I gave his 2 kids a hug, and we talked just for a moment because the line was full, but they turned around and moved over just a few steps back to the right and sat down in some chairs. For the next hour, they sat there. And every time I kind of reached that point where the emotions were heavy and I was just kind of feeling like I needed a little strength, I'd turn around and I'd look and I'd see David. David didn't say much of anything that day, but David came and he was there. He was also there the next night for my father's funeral service, along with Linda, leaving the kids at home. 2.5 hours up here, 2.5 hours home, 2 nights in a row. And the next morning at 11 o'clock, when we assembled at the cemetery for my father's burial, I looked, and coming up in his old pickup truck, 2 hours and 15 minutes to where we were, 2 hours and 45 minutes, 15 minutes farther from where we'd been the night before. David pulls up in that old truck, and he just ambles up and gave me a shoulder hug and basically stood by me through the burial of my father. You don't forget those things. So I don't think it's unusual that Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go be with Mary and Martha." After this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." And all of a sudden, the disciples spoke up and said, "Lord, it hasn't been that long ago that we were there. Do you remember what went on?" It's not exactly the way the Bible records it, but that's what they were saying. The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and you are going there again." I'm sure that was disconcerting, especially to them. But Jesus was not going to let anything stop him from going and being with his friends in an hour in which they needed him, and in an hour in which the glory of the Lord could be shown. And Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." He just said, we're the light of the world. The implication is we're going to walk in the light. And if we walk in the light, it will shine in the darkness. And if grief is not a moment of darkness in our lives, I don't understand fully what it is. And he said, we're going. And he finished with this. These things he said, and after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. Then the disciples, misunderstanding what Jesus has said to him, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get well. However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. Sometimes we just have to do what Jesus was asking the disciples do. I don't know if every time you go to visit someone close to you who's lost someone you love, if it affects you the way it does me. But there's just a little part of me that seems to die too. When you go and you see your friends hurting, and you know how much heartache they may have. And beyond that, if I go visit a man who's a friend whose wife has died, there is that little reminder in the back of my head that someday I may have to wear his shoes. If it's someone who's lost a child, it's incredibly difficult sometimes to go, especially if that child seems to be about the same age as your children might be. And so a little bit of us dies when we go. A little part of us suffers. We're introduced to the fear that might come at the hour that we would have to bid farewell to someone we love so deeply and so completely, as Mary and Martha loved their brother Lazarus, would come. And so Jesus went. And I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Then Thomas, who was called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. What a statement. You know, we've kind of tagged Thomas with that doubting Thomas thing. Let us not forget that when Jesus wanted to go see Lazarus and the disciples feared the confrontation that might result in death with the Jews because they had seen what could happen, who is it that speaks up and says, let us go that we may die with him? So I just remind you that when we pick up that cross of grief and we bear it in behalf of others, we are carrying that cross for them. Just like David came and stood with me and Jesus wanted to go be with Mary and Martha. Just letting go of ourselves for a little while and reaching out to those we love can make a big difference. And Jesus traveled. And when he came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. You think about that lapse of time and just imagine what might have been going through Mary and Martha's minds. Where is he? We haven't heard from him. Why has Jesus not come? You would think that at least he would send a message or do something. But nonetheless, Lazarus had died, and Lazarus would no longer be with them. But Jesus knew what the plan was, and they wanted Jesus there, and they longed for him to come, or they would not have sent for him. Well, they sent for Jesus, but let's remember that the disciples went with him. It may not be necessarily someone who sins for us in their time of heartache and sorrow and grief, but what we need to remember is that if we know about it, maybe we just need to go. Maybe we just need to go. Now, Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away. Remember, Jerusalem was where the problem Jesus had with the Jews. Many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she had heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, But Mary was sitting in the house. What are the first words that are recorded out of Martha's mouth? Then Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. I may read too much in that, but two things I get out of that I love. If you had been here, you had the power to heal him. I believe you had the power to make him well. And secondly, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. There's almost that little feeling of, why weren't you here? But she follows it up with these words. But even now, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give it to you. She believed that now that Jesus was there, everything would be okay. Remember that. If Jesus got there, everything would be okay. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Martha was not totally concerned about the resurrection of the last day because she said, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection. For Mary and Martha and Lazarus, fear of death was just a separation. Apparently, the understanding of death is that there will be a time when we will rise again. But she's missing her brother. She's missing her brother. And Jesus says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whosoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world. Martha runs to meet him. And the very first thing that she can say is, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. And when Jesus responded to her words, but even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. She had this incredible confidence that something wonderful was going to happen. And she said, I know he'll rise in the resurrection. But you're going to find out that just a few verses later, you will find out that with Lazarus' death, Mary and Martha were weeping. The loss of the company of their brother, the loss of the strength that their brother added to their lives, the loss of being a part of his life had broken their hearts, and they were grieving at his death in spite of their absolute faith in the resurrection. I want us to understand that, because I think in all of the lives that we will ever come in contact with that experience death, even those who believe in the resurrection will grieve. I think it's really important that we understand that grief is natural and expected in any loss, whatever that loss is. Sometimes the loss of a job, the loss of a home to a fire, the loss of a marriage that you couldn't save. Losses like that occur all the time, and grief comes with those losses. And we need to understand that it's natural and healthy, And we need to be willing, as Christ did, to go be with those who are weeping because of the death of someone they love. And we need not be judgmental about how brokenhearted they are, about how much they hurt, and about how the tears come, and about how much grief they share. We've just got to understand and realize that they're just like everyone else would be, heartbroken. And when she had said these things, she went away and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, "The teacher has come and is calling for you." As soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came. Now Jesus had not yet come up into the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out following her, saying, "She is going to the tomb to weep there." Then when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying, "Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died." Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" And they said to him, "Lord, come and see." And the shortest verse in the Bible sums up his compassion when it says, Jesus wept. Jesus knew what he was going to do. He knew that he was going to bring Lazarus out of the tomb, resurrect him to this life, another death, and then he would resurrect him to eternal life. But Jesus' heart broke seeing Mary and Martha and those who also loved Lazarus that were with them weeping. He commingled his tears with theirs. And what is more beautiful than two people who care deeply about each other, commingling their tears in grief and in loss? I think we need to be one who knows how to shed tears with someone, to not only embrace them physically, but embrace them emotionally. And if the tears choose to come, apparently Jesus wasn't afraid of them. I think they spoke volumes to those who were there. Because verse 36 says, "Then the Jews said, 'See how he loved him.'" Whatever the expression of grief and heartache that we share with those we love ends up being, it's good when we love and care enough that we go, no matter what the cost may be along the way, no matter that we may hear in that process that we've disappointed someone by not being there sooner. They need to see us and share with us the exact nature of what they're preoccupied with, whether it's a death or whether it's a financial loss or whether it's a burden that's hard to carry. Their son or their daughter is in trouble. We need to love enough to go and to be instruments of God's peace, even if it's a time that we may not have any true understanding or experience with. We need to go and be with them, because then those who are around them will know how we love them. And perhaps they will see how Christians love each other. And if it's one who is not a child of God's, whose heart is broken, and you go to them, they may see a compassion like they've never seen before. Now, of course, there were some of those Jews who came back and said, "Could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying?" That must have hurt if Christ heard that. Because Jesus knew that all of this grief and sorrow was necessary for them to see the glory of God. Then Jesus, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. And Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, "Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not say to you, if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" They took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said these things, he crashed with a loud voice, cried out, "Lazarus, come forth." And he who had died came out bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Loose him and let him go." To me, this is a very poignant story of truth about how Jesus responded at the time of death in the lives of Mary and Martha and their brother. He waited till the full effect could be found because it was a 2 days journey there. And by waiting the 2 days extra to go, he allowed Martha to know full well what he was doing and that he had died. And that did present problems about opening the tomb, but yet he was going to open it anyway so she could see the glory of God. So let us be like Jesus. Let us go when the time comes, even though it may take us to places in our emotions that we do not care to go. If I've lost a wife and a friend dies shortly thereafter, whose husband is left, and I go to him, it's going to stir the emotions of the death of mine. But that man that I go to will know and understand that there is someone there who understands that loss. So while we may not go like they would have gone into a situation that might have meant physical death, there was still a fear there for us to go see eye to eye the one whose heart was broken like ours. But what a comfort it is when we go anyway and offer the consolation that we have to give. So Jesus goes. They say, "Don't go." Thomas said, "I'm going. If he dies, I'll die with him." So maybe we need to let a little of our comfort die in order that we can go be with those who are there. And we may hear something said like Jesus did. If you had just been here, he would not have died. Why weren't you here when he was sick? Why didn't you come 2 weeks ago when you could have talked to him? We may hear those things if we had not been there and done those things. But nonetheless, letting those things be said rids the heart of the one who's lost from emotions that might have grown deeper and darker. But because you've come now, they welcome you. And they overlook any shortcomings that might be there. Maybe it is that you don't know exactly what to say. Then do like David did. Don't say anything much, because when David came to me, he didn't. He stayed with me. He was there. Just go and be there in community with them. If it's nothing more, just to sit and listen to what they have to say, or maybe drink a cup of coffee, or carry a tea cake one morning, 9 or 10 o'clock, to sit down across the table from someone recently wedded and share that tea cake in an hour or two of conversation with. Go to them and do what you can. We need to remember that the sharing of tears is welcome. There's nothing like having someone who loves me enough to weep with me. If they love me enough to laugh with me, and surely they love me enough to weep with me. And don't be afraid of those tears, and let those you go to weep. One thing I didn't mention is the fact that the disciples missed it. They missed it in understanding that Lazarus was dead, because Jesus said to them those very simple words, I go to raise him up. I'd go to awake him from his sleep. And they just lost it. Because if he's going to wake up, there's no reason for us to go. Sometimes we use euphemistic terms and we talk in ways that people may get confused about what it is we're trying to say. So sometimes it's best that we just go ahead and say what it is. Using the word death with children when their mom or dad or brother or sister have died keeps them from being confused when we say they're sleeping. They can't understand then why they don't get up, or why we bury them in the ground, or we put them in a tomb, or we have their bodies cremated and they don't see them anymore. That child may grow to be afraid of going to sleep. So sometimes it's better to let them learn what the word death means themselves. But the bottom is, we just need to go be with them. Whatever the cost to us, whatever the heartache to us, as long as we realize that it's not what we say, but it's that we are that's important. It's not what we say or what we do, but it's that we are there in company with them in their grief that is important. Then also remember that you can do exactly what Jesus did when he went to that tomb. Jesus did everything he could do, and he raised him. You can do everything you can do, but not that. But you can love like Jesus did. You can allow the glory of God to be seen in you, because the love of Jesus is in your heart, and you care enough to go and be a part of what their experience is. So what's left for us to do is just do what Jesus did. Love like Jesus loved. That's an invitation. It's not a command. It's just an invitation. It's an invitation to let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and your love glorify your Father which is in heaven. Stepping out of a life that's separated from God at the invitation of Christ to become his child, to be buried with him in baptism because you believe with all of your heart that he's the Son of God. It's an open invitation to him becoming a part of your life. Coming around and coming back home if you've wandered away, because I know there's grief there. I know there's grief to wake up one morning and realize how far away you've come. I know there's grief in your heart if your profession has never been made. But I know there is a solace for that. And that's just allowing Jesus to lift that burden through the blood he shed on the cross. So my invitation today not only is for you to love like Jesus loved to those around you, but also to love Jesus enough to let him have control of your life. And I know that there are plenty of folks listening who would help you with that decision and help you with that need if you respond to that invitation. Would you bow with me and I'll close with prayer. Father, make us instruments of your peace. Where hearts are broken and lives are torn and difficulties are experienced. Let us be your hands and your heart. Let us be your feet and go, your hands and hold and help, your heart and love and console. And bless us with a heart, Father, that calls us to do that very thing with our own lives and giving ourselves to you in grateful praise of what you have done for us. Thank you, Father, for all that you've said and done in our lives, for all that you've given us and all the help that you've provided. And now bless us, Lord, that we may go and do likewise for others, but also, Father, that if our lives are in a time or in a place where they need to be retied to your love from our side, we know your love is waiting. Bless us, we pray. In the name of your Son, Jesus the Christ. Amen.